Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into another Tuesday Cruiser Chat with Otram. I am back. We made it back from Portugal alive and well, although I am exhausted. Haven't gotten much sleep since we've been back. But yeah, Portugal was excellent. I would definitely go back. And it was an awesome vacation to get recharged. Yeah. So I'm back. So Cruiser Chat will go back to being regular on Tuesdays after missing last week from being out of town. Same as always, no real plan for this evening. Whatever you guys want to chat about, questions, whatever, I will try to answer what I can. Trying to think any big news. We've got the other half of our building now. So we're going from like 2.5 bays to either 6 or 7 bays. So hopefully we'll be able to get the backlog of cruisers on the waiting list down and get some more work knocked out. With getting the other half of the building, I'm also on the hunt for another tech. So if anybody out there is looking to work at a cruiser shop, shoot me an email and we can discuss working at the cruiser shop. We're looking either for entry level that we can, train, entry level person with some mechanical aptitude that we can train how we do things, or a seasoned tech that is willing to do things our way. I've got a very specific way that we do things, and whoever the person we hire is, would need to fit into that. But it's a pretty fun work environment. Me and Crash have a good time working. Pretty much all we work on is cruisers. Occasionally you'll get like a Tacoma or a 4Runner through, but 99% of the time it's Land Cruiser work. We're well tooled. So yeah, if you're looking to work at a cruiser shop or know somebody that is in the Virginia area, shoot me an email, because we're gonna start seriously looking for a third tech soon. Trying to think if there's any other news, and I think that's it. Not a whole lot to report since I was out last week. Crash held the fort down and got a lot of work cranked out while I was gone. So it was super awesome to come back and see a lot less trucks in the parking lot than when I left. Trying to think what else. I got the 3FE swapped 40. I got it to start just before leaving for Portugal. So that was exciting. Now I know my wiring harness on there works. I did some more messing around with it today, just finishing up loose ends, so we can actually run it and burp the cooling system and get everything good to go. Trying to think what else. Got the knuckle rebuild kit in for the Shady 80 shop truck. So in the next couple of weekends, I'll be putting that in. And once the knuckle rebuild and wheel bearings are done, hopefully I can take that thing and get an inspection done on it and actually start driving it. So that will be an exciting day. Not a whole lot's up, Land Cruiser life. I am barely staying awake. I'm running on low amounts of sleep since getting back from vacation. But vacation was good. Oh, and I may have to jump off of here early tonight. I'm not sure yet. One of our good friends, it's her birthday today, and we're going out and doing birthday dinner tonight, but I'm not sure what time it is. So I may have to jump off of here early to go do birthday dinner with a friend, depending on what time my wife gets off work. So we'll see, but hopefully we'll go all the way through till 7. Um, 80 series, full-time four-wheel drive. Wondering what's the biggest lift I can put on it without having trouble. The I guess it depends on your definition of trouble. Without having to do, like radius arms, control arms, a ton of drop brackets, drive shaft mods, things like that, you're about 2.5, 3 inches. Once you start getting into the 4, 5, 6 inch range, you get into having to do heavier caster correction up front, more drop brackets, changing the front drive shaft. A lot of times, drop brake lines, stuff like that. The vast majority of the trucks we just do like the Omanimu 2.5 inch on them. And with those, you can just get away with using the Omanimu caster bushings, and you're good to go. Much taller than that, and you start having to modify more stuff to get all your driveline angles and everything back to correct. Ah. 94s are a lot of fun to troubleshoot because you can't watch live data. We had one, it was either a 93 or a 94, I'm not positive, recently with funky idle issues. And it ended up being the throttle position sensor needed to be adjusted. It was never going to the idle position on the throttle position sensor, even with the throttle all the way closed. So the engine was hunting around looking for idle. If it's only happening when cold, I would lean towards coolant sensor. I'm trying to think. With the Toyota scan tool, you can watch coolant temp, like live data. You could also do a resistance check on it and watch. The values are in the factory service manual. It'll say at X degrees resistance should be this, at Y degrees it should be this, and you can make sure the resistance is in the right range for the given temperature, and it helps to do them cold and hot to make sure the sensor's actually moving, or not moving, but changing resistance. But off the top of my head, that's where I'd look, especially if it's only when cold. Trying to think if there's anything else. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. Throttle position sensor, it's only 2 screws holding it on. The problem is to actually adjust it, you hook a voltometer, up to like this pin and this pin with a such and such feeler gauge between the throttle stop, between throttle and throttle stop, and you adjust it until it's X resistance at that gap, and then you check it with 2 other feeler gauges on either end of that and make sure that it goes open and closed. So it's not difficult, it's just kind of finicky. I only saw 2 Land Cruisers while we were in Portugal. I saw an 80 series and a 90 series. So I would count the 90 series as a cool one because I love 90 series cruisers. it was funny. I posted a picture on Instagram while we were there, and it turned out there was a guy that follows us on Instagram and I think on YouTube as well, that was like 15 minutes away from where we were staying in Portugal. So we tried to hook up with him, but it just didn't work out because our schedule was so tight. But yeah, it was a lot of fun even without cruisers. Steve just bought a 9480 series, but the locker switch is missing from the dash. You can see the wires in there. Is there a video to see if they work? I haven't done any videos on the e-lockers. I need to rebuild the locker actuators on my truck, so I'll do videos on that when I get to that stage, but that's going to be a little further down the line. But I don't have anything on the switch or actuators or anything yet. And yeah, we do work on Forerunners, 4Runners, Tacomas, Sequoias, pretty much any of the Toyota SUVs, pickups. The website says just Land Cruiser, and 99.9% of what we do is Land Cruiser. But we've got, all the information and diagnostic stuff to work on the Forerunners and everything else as well. We just don't see many of them because everybody just thinks of us as a Land Cruiser shop. And back to the 80 series lockers, I want to say there's only 4, maybe 5 wires going to the actual locker switch. You could probably check the wiring diagram and figure out which ones to jump to actuate each locker. And there's a couple of wiring diagrams for them up on I Hate Mud. And a couple of guys, there's a guy with a wiring diagram on how to build your own controller for them. And I followed his instructions using the e-locker switch to run Harrops in a truck. And I've also done it to run ARBs. So you might be able to do that just to test them. 93 distributor connector. Can you get just the connector by itself? I have no idea. I've never tried. If you've got a good Toyota parts guy, you might be able to get them to find, like whenever I've gotten the connectors, it'll be like the connector shell, and then you've got to get all the pins that go in it. So you've got to find a parts guy that'll be able to cross-reference and figure out which connector shell you need and which pins you need to go in it. So hopefully it's out there. But I've never tried to look them up. And to Stefan, awesome. Glad you're digging the channel. Swapping the coolant temp sensor tips. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. They're a little tricky to get to, just trying to get a socket and everything on them. I think it ends up being a deep socket, a swivel, and like a 12-inch extension to get a good shot at it. It's not difficult, but it's not particularly easy either. It's in such a tight spot. Be real careful when you go to pull the electrical connector off. It's real easy to break them. And we don't have much of any plans for doing Tacoma and 4Runner videos, just because we only really have a chance to film videos on the stuff that we do all the time. And since we don't see Tacomas and 4Runners much, we don't get the chance to do videos on them. And very good point, Art, to make sure that it actually has lockers before trying to do all the testing. We've got several 80 series front drive shafts at the shop. All of them have bad slip joints in them, although they're varying degrees of bad. We saved them because while they'd be kind of annoying to drive as a daily driver, we kept them as trail spares when they got replaced. I'll probably be digging through that pile to find one for my 80 since it doesn't have a drive shaft in the front. Not sure why it's missing, but it's not there. But yeah, we've got a couple. None of them are great, but we do have a couple if you end up like really being in a bind. Um, so normally on a on Toyota stuff, at least the older stuff, when the alternator starts failing, it'll pop the brake light and the battery light on together. And I have no idea why they put the brake light and the battery together when the alternator's going bad, but that's the general symptom. I can't say that I've ever seen the AT fluid temp light come on with that. But it's it's a possibility. And most of them that we see with bad alternators are just the brushes in the back, and you can get the brushes for like $20, and they're super easy to replace. I did a video on it probably last year, but they're easy to do. And Jamie, yeah, we can replace the U-joints, but the spare shafts that we've got, I don't know that any of them are good enough that it would be worth replacing the U-joints in them. The slip joints are so worn. That's why we replaced them. The slip joints were worn enough that it wasn't worth putting U-joints in the ones that needed them. We just put in, whole new shafts from Toyota. Because, it seems like most of the trucks that are coming through that have a worn U-joint also have really worn slip joints. And we're actually seeing we're seeing them more often with really worn slip joints and still good U-joints. It'll have like a grumbly hum going down the road. But yeah, the ones we have probably aren't worth the money to put U-joints in. I've never really tried the chemical flushes for heater cores. I've always been scared of adding any random chemicals to the cooling system. There's a flush tool, I think Gates makes it. It's actually made by a company called HECAT, HECAT. And if I remember right, it hooks up to an air hose and a water hose, and it pulse flushes, like does shock waves to flush heater cores out. It's supposed to work fantastic. I've never used one though, so I don't know for sure. And to Mimi Danny, Toyota Highlander, and replace the inner and outer tie rod ends, but it still feels funny steering. It could be just cheap parts. It also could be the ball joints sticking or sticky spots in the steering rack, depending on how it feels. The parts store in general, AutoZone, Advance, CarQuest, they're like house brand steering and drivetrain parts are just junk. We try to only use either factory Toyota or 3.5, which is 555, branded like steering parts. It makes it really hard to diagnose when you've got cheap parts on a vehicle. It can it can make it hard to figure out what's actually going on, whether it's the new parts, old parts, combination of them. But yeah, I would take a look at the ball joints before I went back through and replaced the tie rod ends, but that's just a guess. I haven't seen any head gasket failures on the 4-liter V6 or the 4.7. We see quite a lot of 4.7s through the shop and haven't seen any head gasket failures on them. I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 of the 4-liter V6s through. So I wouldn't be a reliable source of information on those. But we do, I don't know, 10 or more V8 trucks a month, and haven't seen head gasket issues with them. And yeah, it could be an alignment problem. I was never an alignment tech, so I am not the guy to ask about alignment problems. I always just take those to the alignment guy and say, hey, do this. Crash has done alignments and tires and stuff. He's much better at reading tire wear and diagnosing issues like that. So I default to him or the alignment guy on stuff like that. I guess it could be steering rack bushings. I've never really looked at a Highlander to see how the rack's held in there, but I would assume Toyota did it the same way they do every other one of their steering racks. So yeah, it could be rack bushings. I didn't even think of that. And we've done, I think it's White Line makes some polyurethane rack bushings. We've done them on a couple of 4Runners and 100 Series Land Cruisers, and they've helped tremendously in sloppy steering. And they're relatively cheap. I think they're only like $50. Maybe less than that. Oh, and I knew there was something else I was going to mention at the beginning. I should have the latest batch of 1FZ crank holding tools in the morning. So yeah, those will be back in stock soon if anybody's looking for those. And I have also heard that mixing Toyota Red and Prestone Green coolant will cause issues. I don't have any firsthand experience with it, like seeing it do bad things. But, we keep Prestone Green, Toyota Red, Toyota Pink, all in stock so that we never have to worry about mixing them. And if we get ones in that look like they've been mixed, we generally flush them and replace them with the proper coolant. And to Robert V, it depends on why you're doing the brake bleed. If you're just trying to flush them, sometimes you can get away with not using the factory scan tool to activate the pump. Sometimes it'll do it on its own. If you've had the lines open or the booster pump or the booster accumulator off or any of the ABS stuff open, then you have to have the scan tool to run the ABS valves in order to bleed the brakes. 1GR FE leaking exhaust manifold. It's gonna throw the oxygen sensors out of whack depending on how bad the leak is. So it could be messing with fuel control, gas mileage, fueling, stuff like that. I would assume if it was that bad, you'd have a check engine light also. It's always good to replace leaking exhaust components just so you're not getting exhaust into the cab with you and breathing it. So I would lean towards replacing it. As far as factory heater cores, Toyota's going to be your best source. Beyond them, look and see if you can find a Denso brand one. I haven't used their heater cores, but I've used their AC evaporator cores, and they've worked quite well. Yeah, I haven't used the eBay cables or the pirated TechStream. We've got TechStream loaded on a Windows 7 laptop at the shop, but it's like actual Toyota. Like you've got to subscribe to it and pay them, quite a bit of money to get it. TechStream. And it's always worked when we need it. We use it with a Cardac Plus box that does all the talking between the computer and the vehicle. You can also get it's a DrewTech Mongoose cable. I want to say like $400, but that's the factory TechStream cable is the Mongoose. But yeah, I've heard about lots of people having issues trying to get the cheap eBay cables or the pirated TechStream software to work properly. And if you're replacing the calipers, you're more than likely going to need a scan tool to bleed the brakes. I haven't actually tried doing it without using the scan tool because we've got the scan tool and it's easy enough to do it that way. I know Danny's done flushes using a power bleeder and not used the scan tool. But I haven't tried doing calipers without using the electric bleed process. And to Skittles, I have no thoughts on manual hubs for the 100. To use manual hubs, you'd have to get rid of full-time four-wheel drive and make it a part-time kit. Otherwise, you'd have to drive around with your center diff locked all the time. I know Kurt from Cruiser Outfitters just did a post on Instagram either yesterday or today that they had just put manual hubs on 100 series, but I haven't actually read the details on it yet. So, yeah, currently no thoughts. I know people talk about doing it on the 80 series to increase gas mileage, but I think it would take forever, to pay off the cost of the parts in saved gas mileage, and you lose the full-time four-wheel drive with it. So I don't really see the advantages on an 80. I would assume the 100 series is pretty similar, so I don't really see the advantage there either, but there may be something I'm missing. What scan tool would I recommend for brake work? My very first real scan tool was a Snap-on Solus Ultra, and it was like $5,000, and it was very hit and miss on doing Toyota brake work. You'd pull it out, and sometimes it wouldn't do what you wanted it to do. For up till like 2005, I've got an old Toyota MasterTech, and you can find them on eBay. I paid $250 for mine. The screen's a little funky, but I don't care. But they seem to run $250 to $1,000. And as long as you don't need to go newer than, it's either 2005 or 2007, it works great. And it's easy to use. It's not as fast as using TechStream. But TechStream, I think last time I looked, was like $65 for 2 days of access, or it's like $1,200 for a year. So it gets expensive. And there's some other aftermarket scan tools that say they'll do the Toyota brake stuff, but they're hit and miss on whether they actually do. And Skittles is asking about getting some hand tools and brands that will last a lifetime and won't break the bank. The gear wrench stuff seems to be really good. A lot of the Matco ratchets and wrenches are like rebranded gear wrench, and I really like them. Nowadays, I don't think any of them are going to last a lifetime. I regularly break my Matco and Snap-on ratchets. Luckily, you pay a ton of money, but the guy rebuilds them every week. He doesn't come rebuild them every week, but when you break them, they rebuild them. If you're working as an actual like full-time tech, the Snap-on, Matco, Cornwell stuff is worth the money. But I've also got a lot of gear wrench and SK and off-brand stuff in my toolbox. But the stuff I use every day is either Snap-on or Matco. And DrewTech makes the interface cable that lets you use Toyota TechStream on a laptop. So TechStream is the Toyota software, and the DrewTech, Mongoose, or Cardac is the interface that goes between the two. I worked for Sears in the late 90s. I would never, ever, ever buy a Craftsman ratchet after as many as I rebuilt working there. But I'm also jaded from having worked there. Yeah, a lot of the newer Toyota SUVs, like the 100 Series, the 4Runners, they've got an electric master cylinder. So the booster, master, and ABS is all one unit. So you've got to have a scan tool to run it to be able to bleed them. And yeah, to GWW's comment, pawn shops and Craigslist are also excellent places to get really good deals on really high-end tools. And to Jim, thoughts on Rotella oil? I've got customers that run it. I generally don't do it solely because I'm of the mind that, Toyota spec'd this, X engine to run on 5W30. That's what I'm going to put in it. On the older stuff, like the 80 series, it seems to not hurt anything. The newer stuff with, variable valve timing and different cam actuators, you really have to stick with the factory weight oil. So I generally just go by factory specs because I know that's what Toyota wanted. But I know a lot of people do run the Rotella. We run it in the diesel trucks that come through the shop. And TechStream is a one-person bleed operation. If you're using a pressurized power bleeder also, so that you can leave the bleeder open and push the brake pedal. Without the pressure bleeder, it makes it a two-person job. Yeah, the US made Craftsman is definitely better than the newer Chinese stuff. And to Robert V, no, you'll be fine with the factory length brake lines with a 2-inch lift. On the front, you're not really changing the length of the brake line. You're just changing, where it lands in the travel with the control arms. And the back, they're a little tight at full droop, but they seem to be fine. We see a ton of them come through, with 2.5 inches of lift and factory brake lines. And with a 2-inch lift, no, the sway bar links, they'll be fine. Going to, a little bit longer ones will make it technically, the proper geometry. But I can't say that I've ever put longer sway bar links on a 100 series. Oh, and to Jerry, if you're going to choose a pressure bleeder, there's a company called Power Probe, and they make electrical testing tools, but they also make these really slick billet aluminum pressure brake bleeder adapter caps. And you need that to go with the pressure bleeder because the universal caps chain around the master and they won't fit around the electric master on a 100 series. You've got to use the Power Probe adapter one. And they're like $70 for the adapter, but they're super awesome. We've got several of them at the shop, and they make bleeding brakes much easier. I do like thumbs ups. Whew, I also like naps. Changing the calipers and not using the scan tool, you're probably not going to get air out of the lines. You might be able to change the calipers without it, because Danny said that he's done flushes without using the scan tool, which means he's getting fluid flowing past the ABS. He's doing it with the pressure bleeder, though, not the pump to brake pedal method. So you might be able to get away with it without doing it. I haven't tried it. But if he's flushing without it, it stands a good chance that you could also do calipers since they're downstream of all the ABS. But I haven't tried it to know for sure. Since we've got a couple of scan tools that'll do it, there's always one nearby to grab. So we just use the power bleed method. We don't see very many seized pistons on the 100 series. I'm starting to see them more on the 80 series. But I know, like the Forerunners and the FJ Cruisers, it's really common to seize calipers on them. And all the Toyota stuff seems to warp discs. And I don't know why, but it's real common to have warp rotors. And it's probably not safe to drive to the dealer because you won't have brakes. Or if you do, you'd have to pump them a ton. to build pressure to overcome the spongy air in the lines. And the 100 series Master does not like doing that because it's like there's no vacuum brake booster on them. It's got a hydraulic cylinder that a pump pressurizes, and then as you hit the brakes, it uses the pressurized fluid out of there as the boost. And if you pump too many times, it has to refill that accumulator, and it can get funky. Yeah, it is not fun when the brakes fail on the 100 series, when the booster goes bad. Theoretically, you've got between 30 and 40 brake applications after the pump fails if the accumulator is fully charged. But I've seen them take much less than that before they actually stop having brake pressure. Yeah, the first time I saw the electric booster master cylinder ABS combo, I was like, wow, this is a great idea. Everything's one unit. It's so compact. This is awesome. And after having to work on them and replace parts on them and seeing the price of the parts on them, I'm not such a big fan anymore. I would go back to using, a traditional master booster and separate ABS, so you don't have to replace everything when one part goes bad. Let me go yell at the dogs real quick to make sure they come in. Never mind, I can see them both. One of them likes to run away and dig under the fence, so you've always got to check on her if she's been out in the yard for a while and you haven't seen her running around. How many vehicles do I own? We've got my wife's Prius, my Subaru, my 80 series, a 90 Camry, and my 4Runner. So I guess 5. When my wife and I first started dating, I think I had 7 and a trailer just for me. Which we had to pare it down to 1 when we moved to Boston, and then we had 2. But now that I've got the shop and I can hide vehicles there, the stable is growing. And hey, Alex, how's it going? Oh, and I'm glad the 1FZ head gasket video was useful. I figured I had the engine out and was doing a head gasket, so it'd be super easy to film it that way. Any recommendations on aftermarket brake rotors that are slotted and drilled? The slotted and drilled seem to eat pads faster. They're super awesome. We've used the Terrain Tamer heavy-duty ones and EBC and DBA, and they all seem to work well, but they eat pads a lot faster. So 90% of the time, we just use factory rotors. Those seem to hold up the best with the best, average of life and braking power. On trucks that need more braking power, we'll use drilled and slotted rotors and a softer pad, like an EBC green stuff, something like that. But yeah, so they're good. And I just saw that Overland East was in Virginia this year, but I am not sure if I will be going or not. I got to look at the dates, because our anniversary, my wife and I's anniversary, is early October, and we've been talking about taking a trip to either Mexico or somewhere similar, since it's our 10-year this year. So it just depends on where the dates line up. And Alex, no problem. I figured it was easy enough to send a couple crank tools down for a Relic Run sponsorship. And my dad will be down there later this week, and I don't know who else is coming with him. If I hadn't been gone to Portugal all last week, I would have come down for Relic Run, but I'm playing so much catch up. I'm exhausted, so I won't be making it down. Yeah, my brother just put power stops on the back of his 80, but he hasn't actually driven it enough to know how they work. And thanks for the welcome back, James. It was an excellent trip. I would move to Portugal in a heartbeat. And that's awesome. And I meant to email you today to see how driving your truck home went. I've been curious about that since you picked it up. And October 11th to 13th is probably not going to work since my anniversary is on the 10th. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, the photos that have been popping up from our trip, those are all from my wife's cell phone. I just dumped my big camera pictures to the computer yesterday, and I think I've got 2,600. I took a lot of pictures of seagulls. I need to go through and actually convert them from RAW to JPEG so I can post them. I just haven't gotten through yet. And awesome to hear that your truck's running well. I was hoping that would do the trick. And yeah, I'm sorry I'm missing Relic Run this year, but it looks like it's going to be a good time. There's a huge crew coming down from up here. And as far as rust proofing, fluid film seems to be your best option, at least as far as I've seen. Pretty much anything but undercoat. Undercoat is the devil for rust. It seems to make more rust rather than keeping it from rusting. And as far as air conditioner pumps, I also use Denso on those. The Denso stuff, I'm pretty sure it's OE, and it just seems to hold up well, fit well, and it just works well. So yeah, Denso for like AC parts, alternators, ignition stuff. We use a lot of Denso. There's a couple other things that fall under the Denso envelope, but I can't think of them right now. Yeah, if you're following the Rover crew around, I hope you've got all your snatch straps ready. And to Robert, you can replace the AC clutch without removing the compressor. The only tricky part is going to be the clutch gets shimmed for proper air gap, and the clutch shims are maybe a half an inch around, 3/8, half inch. They're really tiny and kind of go down in the snout. And it's going to be tricky to get those to sit in there right, slap the clutch in, and get the bolt in. It's a lot easier if you can do it with the compressor pointing clutch up, so you can like stack everything as you assemble it. But it is doable in the truck. It's just not as easy. We were out wheeling at one of the local trails, local wheeling runs, and there was a Land Rover, stopped blocking the trail, and they couldn't get it to restart. Could not get this thing to restart, and the guy calls Land Rover Tech on his cell phone. It was a burned out brake light bulb. Like, if the brake light bulb burns out, something keeps the truck from starting. It was the craziest thing. They put a new brake light bulb in it, the thing started up, and he drove it out. So yeah, it should be an interesting time. Hey, how's it going, Logan? You haven't been on here in a while. So yeah, that's the fun part with AC compressor failure, is a lot of times they sling shrapnel through the system, and usually you're supposed to do, I think it's the receiver dryer, the condenser, and the evaporator, and then flush all the lines, because the condensers aren't flushable because they're multi-path. So if there's crap stuck in one of the hoses, the flush just goes around it. So technically, you were supposed to replace a ton of parts. And I have not used Brembos. I don't think I've used Brembos on a Land Cruiser. I used them on an old truck I had and didn't notice any difference. By and large, we use factory rotors for almost everything. And traveling is good. I'm hoping to one day build the shop up that I can do more traveling. I have not seen cruise control turn off on an 80 with a turn signal. That seems strange, but I've never used cruise control. Like, I'm not a cruise control person, so I've never really messed with the ins and outs of it, and we very rarely have anybody ask us to diagnose anything with cruise control. So I've never really dealt with it much. But that seems really strange that it would turn off when you use the turn signal. It kind of sort of makes sense, because I guess it's thinking that you're going to need to change speed if you're either passing somebody or turning. But I don't know if it's actually supposed to do that or not. Whew. I've seen LEDs do weird things. We had a guy, and he may be on here because Dave tunes in all the time. He put LED bulbs in his instrument cluster on his 80, and it did all kinds of weird things. And we went back and put incandescent bulbs in it, and it solved a lot of the weird problems. It was the strangest thing. And congrats to Alex for hitting 300K. Yeah, I think, we do see 80s blow head gaskets, but we do a lot more gasket replacements for people wanting to do them as preventative maintenance than we do on ones that are actually blown. They don't seem, I think it's like blown out of proportion how often they pop. Like the 80 series I just got has 348,000 on it on the original gasket, and that thing has been rode hard. Every other system on it's broken, but the head gasket's still good. Any special tricks or good to knows for window regulator replacement on an 80? Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. It's, It's a pretty straightforward job. Don't get your fingers stuck in the regulator. And either take the glass completely out of the door or duct tape it in the up position when you take the regulator out. You just want to be absolutely sure that the glass doesn't fall down, while you're working, because you'll break the glass. I have not seen a head gasket leak at the timing cover to head interface. I wonder if somebody either didn't get the sealer in there when the head gasket was done or the front 2 bolts were loose. That's weird. If cruise control works and the dash bulb doesn't come on, my first guess would be dash bulb. But I've never actually gone through the wiring diagram to see what else it could be. But I would try dash bulb first. Vacation was excellent. Portugal is definitely in the top 3 of countries that I've been to so far. I absolutely loved it there. We started out mostly up near in Lisbon and day tripping around Lisbon. And then our last 2 days, we went down to Carvoeiro on the southern coast. And had we known how amazing the southern coast was, we would have gone and spent a lot more time there. It was absolutely amazing. I would not trust a Dorman rear locker actuator for a 100. I wouldn't trust Dorman anything. I wouldn't trust it as a doorstop. I used to have a hybrid vehicle side of the business, and we did a ton of the hybrid batteries, like remans from Dorman. And every single one of them I installed, I had to eat under warranty. Some of them 4 and 5 times. Dorman is not a company I will ever deal with again. They were absolutely terrible. And to Jim, I've never tried to fix the trip meter on an 80. You're probably going to have to get a whole cluster, as crappy as that sounds. I've never tried opening one up to mess with it, but a lot of times, since it's tied in with the odometer and they don't want odometer tampering, you can't really get in there to mess with them. Number 1 country that I've been to is probably Peru. It was our first big, international trip. But Cusco was absolutely amazing. Machu Picchu was amazing. So yeah, I loved Peru. So it's like Peru, Portugal, and then Guatemala, Costa Rica are tied for 3rd. But yeah, we do a new country a year. And so far, Portugal's one of my favorites. I've never dealt with a limited slip in an LX470. I didn't even know that was an option. So I honestly don't know. 2003 LX470 needs a new muffler. Doug Thorley, the guys that make the headers, make a stainless steel catback for, I know, the 100 series and probably also the LX470, because I can't imagine why they would be different. It's like $500 for a complete stainless catback, and it's a really nice system. So that's my first choice. Second choice is factory Toyota. Third choice is Bosel. They don't fit great, but they kind of sort of work. I've never heard of Supreme. Oh, if you want something quiet, then I would not go Doug Thorley. The Doug Thorley is louder than stock. I would probably go factory muffler. They're stupid expensive, but they hold up better than the other aftermarket stuff. And you know it's going to fit because it's Toyota. Yeah, Peru is absolutely amazing. I loved Peru. Guatemala is also amazing. Antigua is just an awesome town. Uh, and going out to Flores and Tikal to see the ruins is super cool. And yeah, you can get just the muffler. Trying to think of how it comes from Toyota. I think it goes and it branches just ahead of the muffler to catch the two cats, and then there's a fitting right above the rear axle before the tailpipe. And yes, coffee is great in South and Central America. Coffee in Portugal was absolutely terrible. And I have not been to Mongolia. We haven't been anywhere in Asia yet. I really want to go to Thailand and Cambodia, but I really don't want to be on a plane that long. Yeah, glad to be back. A vacation was amazing, but after the travel day on Sunday, all I wanted to do was sleep. I am so glad to be back. But I guess to go back to Logan's question, Mongolia does look awesome. It's just not super high up on the list. I want to hit Turkey too, but after things settle down. Yeah, I've got a bunch of friends that have been to Thailand, and they've all said it was amazing. Ooh, I didn't realize it was 7 o'clock already. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and jump off of here for the evening so I can get the dogs fed. And I can get ready to go out to our friend's birthday dinner. And I have also heard awesome things about Chile. We've got a buddy that lives in Santiago and keeps trying to get us to come down. So one of these days, we're going to have to actually go on down. But yeah, anyway, thanks to everybody for tuning in. I'll be back next Tuesday. If you dig chats and the videos, please remember to subscribe below. If you really dig the chats and the videos, check out our Patreon link down in the description. We always appreciate the support. And I mentioned it at the very beginning of the video, but we just took the second half of the building. So the shop just doubled in size. So we are looking for a third tech. If anybody's in the Virginia area and interested in working at a cruiser shop or knows somebody that is, send them my way. Because we're going to start really looking for techs soon, so we can keep using the other space, or so we can utilize the rest of the space. And yes, to Woohoo, the shop is getting bigger. And to Lawrence Lloyd, when I turn off the LX470, whirring sound comes from the gas tank. Does it ever run continuously and run down the battery? I have never heard that. I'm guessing it's one of the vent valves on the emissions box doing its thing. I would doubt it would run continuously and run down the battery. It's probably just one of the solenoids equalizing pressure or something. Yeah, to vent, either to vent or they have really weird strategies as far as the vapor retention and stuff goes. I know my wife's Prius makes a noise like that, and it's one of the canister vents. And to Christian, when you switch from P to D, there's a loud bang. Shop says motor mounts. I have never actually had to do motor mounts on a Land Cruiser. I've never seen one fail. I mean, it's always a possibility, but I would look more at drive shafts and drive shaft slip joints. And my 4Runner is an 87 first gen, but it's been solid axle swapped and 3 linked and is running on 80 series axles. And on a 100 series, charcoal canister is back by the fuel tank, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, cool. Well, I am jumping off of here to go feed the dogs. I will catch you guys next week. Thanks so much for tuning in.